You're listening to Releasing Trauma, a survivor's podcast. And now here's your host, Tracy Osborne. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. All right, today we're going to be talking about how survival is not the final destination. And with trauma survivors, we have several stages. We have the victim, we have survival, and then we have what so many of us call thriver. And that's kind of the end stage where we've got a control on our traumas, on our triggers, and on ourselves, and we're ready to move forward and just live life again. So with me today is Leticia Francis, and we're going to be talking about how survival is not the final destination, but she's also going to talk about her journey and her story of parental emotional abandonment and abuse and so forth. So Leticia, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
I am excited to have you. Thank you so much for coming on. Let's go ahead and just start with having you kind of give us a little bit of a rundown of your story.
Sure. So I was born in Bermuda, and at the age of 7, I was told by a family member that my birth was the reason for my parents' divorce. So that created a spiral of emotion for me that essentially led me in a position where both of my parents remarried. Both of their spouses really didn't want anything to do with me. So I was living in between two family units. I lived with my mother most of the time, but never really felt welcome in her home. She had 2 younger children with her husband, so that was her focus. And my father was married to someone who had children. So it was, where do I fit into that? And there were times where, I really looked for attention from my parents and didn't get it. To me, my perception was they always chose their spouse. And I didn't understand why am I being neglected here? Emotionally, because of someone who came in the picture after I did. And that led me to look for love and attention and affection elsewhere, which ultimately led me into a 14-year age gap relationship that was abusive. And Bermuda's a very small place, so my mom found out about the relationship very quickly. And she did a background check and realized that this man, all of his relationships ended in restraining orders. And she warned me. But because of the relationship that I had with her, I didn't really trust her. I didn't really feel seen by her. So for me, as a 14-year-old child, I just felt like she was taking something else away from me, and I didn't listen. So I'm in this relationship having to defend the age difference because, it was obvious. I was in high school. He was picking me up in his car, having to defend that. And then also having to hide the fact that this man was abusive to me. I couldn't let go of the relationship because it felt better to me than the relationship that I had with my parents. I felt seen, I felt heard, I felt loved. I felt like I was his number one. Whereas with my parents, there was suicide attempts and still no real connection with me. I felt like I spent years having to fill that role of the troubled teenager because people didn't have enough time to figure out what was actually going on with me. So I stay in this relationship. I, hide what's going on. I grow into an adult in a relationship full of abuse. And that relationship, which ended up being a marriage, I married him when I was 19, ended because he stabbed me. And even when I was stabbed, I couldn't depend on my parents. My mom came and picked me up that night, and no less than 90 minutes later, she was carting me to the police station so that I can go live in a homeless shelter. So by the time I was 21, I've literally had to figure out my own way because my parents were too consumed with what was going on in their lives. And I've now left this abusive relationship. And I was naive because I thought leaving would make everything so much better. You know, I'm out of that craziness. So life is just going to be rainbows and unicorns and blah, blah,
only
blah.
It worked that way.
Right. Well, for the first time, I was faced with the reality that I actually didn't know who I was. My identity had been tied to the relationships that I had. So if anyone asked me about me, my response would have been, oh, I'm so-and-so's child, or I'm so-and-so's wife. But who is Leticia? I had no idea. And because of that, because of my naivety, I'm faced with the shame of my experiences, the guilt of walking away from my abusive relationship. And I didn't know how to deal with that. So that ended up looking like me drinking every single day for years. And not like wine or, some Baileys that milk to put me to sleep. Like I was literally at my worst point drinking more than a bottle of scotch a day. Oof. And I didn't like the taste of scotch and I didn't like being drunk, but that was my escape from what was going on in my head. And I didn't realize that was trauma. I had survived being stabbed. I had survived having to grow up basically on my own emotionally. I was a survivor and I was proud of it. But I didn't realize in that moment that I had moved from being a victim to a survivor. Now I'm living in survival mode. And survival mode was the drinking. Survival mode for me was promiscuity, entering into relationships that were like the walls were laden with huge red flags. Like the only way that I couldn't see them if I was colorblind, which I'm not. I wear glasses, so my vision is 20/20, right? But because of what was going on inside, because of the shame, the guilt, the anger, I allowed myself to be in crazy situations over and over and over. Like I went from an abusive husband to a married cokehead to a crackhead that got me arrested.
Oh, goodness.
And there was still a point where I couldn't face my truth. I felt like, my position in life is to help other people. And I just have to deal with the cards I'm dealt. But I'll tell you what, my last relationship, I was with a guy who, for the first time I had entered into a relationship, not from a place of need. I felt like I was pretty solid in who I was. And the relationship was like a whirlwind, almost like a fairy tale, almost too good to be true. And a year into that relationship, one of his family members died and he relapsed on cocaine and crack cocaine. And I spent months, sleepless nights, days, literally trying to figure out how I'm going to get this man help. And this is not entering into this naive because I had been in a relationship with a cocaine for 3 years just before that. So I understood the nature of addiction. So giving up all of me to help fix him when he wasn't ready. And that resulted with me being in jail. He was stealing, and I received some stolen goods unknowingly. And everything that I had built, I had spent years building after I started working on me, crumbled like sand that day. And I remember my mom came to the jail and she said to me, "Why do you love everyone else more than you love yourself?" And you know what? There's something about the truth that you absolutely cannot escape. I could, in that moment, have become so defensive and tell her she doesn't know what she was talking about. But it made me realize in that moment, you know what? Take some ownership here. Just take some ownership. The only reason why you're here today is because of your decisions. You cannot throw this on anybody else. And that moment changed my life. Being able to take ownership for my right? Just keep it real. Changed my life. And I hired a coach after that. And she was a brutal, brutal lady, but I needed that. Like I am not you can't handle me with a soft brush. You gotta come hard, right? But she made me realize that I had glorified being a victim, right? It had become comfortable to me. Yeah. It had become my narrative. I am a victim of all of these circumstances around me, but that was something that was me giving away my control. And I'm going to tell you something, Tracy. I'm a stubborn girl. I'm very, very stubborn, right? So having the awareness that I am intentionally giving away my control, it had to stop. And it had to stop right there and then.
Right.
I had to work through my trauma. I had to learn how to let go. I had to learn how to forgive myself. I had to learn how to love myself, right? Because these tend to, when we survive things, we tend to apply that narrative to ourselves. Like we won't go into conversations without bringing up the fact that we've survived these traumatic experiences. We need to almost justify the fact that we're still here today, right? But that in itself, again, giving away my power. So learning how to work through that, learning how to accept that I am more than my trauma. I am more than that, gave me the tools that I needed in order to move out of the survival mode that I have been in for a decade. You know, a complete decade, like of literally being on autopilot or being in a holding pattern like the airplanes, right? Just circling around and thinking that I'm living. So as a result of that coaching relationship, I decided to pack up and leave Bermuda. And I bought my crack addicted boyfriend with me. No, but it was a positive thing. We both committed to focusing on us and doing what we're going to do to fix our mess, right? And 9 years later, we're married. We have 2 beautiful children together. And I have built my business around helping women challenge the narrative, challenge that victim mentality that we get so comfortable living in, and taking control and doing what it is that they see fit to do. You know, so many of us just get stuck and we think it's okay because we're not living that trauma anymore. But it's so much more to life than just surviving. And I know it's my mission to help other people see that, you know, particularly women, because I feel that because of the roles that society places on us, we are often in a position where we have to choose to sacrifice in order to have what we desire. And I'm tired of seeing this sacrifice come at us, packing away our dreams for years and years and years because we think we need to.
I hear you there. I hear you there. I think you had mentioned early on about, you don't understand why parents would choose their spouses over their kids. And that is super, super common in blended families. And, that's something that I experienced as well. I did not get along with my stepmom. My older brother and sister did not get along with my stepmom. You'd think dad would have seen a pattern here. But dad chose her over us. And his reasoning was that one day we're going to be grown and gone, and she is his partner for life. And I get that, but I don't, I understand his reasoning, but yet at the same time, as a parent, it's like, okay, she's manipulative and she's emotionally abusive to your children. And, there's a disconnect there, Dad. And for me, that fortified the abandonment issues that I had felt with my father when my parents got divorced. So, I don't know the whole mentality behind choosing the new partner over the kids, but I have a small understanding of why. But yeah, I don't know. Not everybody, I guess, believes that kids should come first. I don't know. But it had the 14-year age gap. It sounds like something I would have done. I was 16 and I was dating guys 10 years older than me. So, I
listen.
Been there. Not quite that bad, but yeah, been there. Yeah, and I'm glad that you were aware that, what you had wasn't right, but it was what you had. And you were getting the attention and the love that you needed that you didn't get from your parents, albeit in a not so healthy fashion, but
absolutely.
We do tend to get stuck in survivor mode, and we do tend to get stuck in the victim mentality. Because for so many of us, that's all we've known. And, who we are outside of that is the unknown. And, with the unknown is great fear. Who am I? Who am I outside of this trauma? I don't know. My identity is an abuse survivor or a rape survivor or whatever. And so we get caught up in that uncomfortable comfort zone. And
absolutely. I mean, that's the hardest thing because we don't, like I said, we got comfortable there. It's just as hard to get uncomfortable again. So that's what we run from, right?
Yep.
Even though we're uncomfortable, well, comfortably uncomfortable.
Exactly.
But not willing to get uncomfortable to get comfortable, which is the biggest fight for a lot of us. But it's just, my hope is to show people that there is something on the other side, and being able to share my story. I got to be honest, like, this is my 110th podcast since July of last year.
Wow.
And I'm motivated because I know how hard it is to check ourselves and do something just slightly different so that we can see something different. I run away from pain. I don't want to feel pain, but the only analogy that I can share to encourage others is, imagine having like a really break in your leg, and doctors tell you that they have to break it more in order for it to mend properly. That process of breaking it to the point where it can actually heal effectively is probably more painful than before that you healed, right? You have to go under anesthesia, you have to be cut, you have to be drilled, you have to go through all of these things in order for you to heal in a way that you can walk with other.
Right.
And that's the same with our healing, right? It's hard to relive what we've been through. It's hard to have to go back and go through the healing process. But if we don't, we continue to live in pain, even if we're not always conscious of it, right? But if we give ourselves the opportunity to break some more, to drill, to cut, to mend together so that you are in a position where you're actually walking without a limp, you realize that, yes, the process was painful, but without doing it, you are stuck with the reality that your pain is going to get worse eventually. But going through the healing process, going through the break, going through the drilling and the cutting and all of that gives you the opportunity to one day forget the pain.
Absolutely. You can choose to adapt and live with the pain, the constant pain, or you can choose to go through the temporary massive discomfort that comes with healing, and it is a massive discomfort. My mother, excuse me, my mother was, bullied and victimized by her brothers growing up, and she harbored that resentment until the day she died. And she harbored that victim mentality until the day she died. And she died as a very miserable person that nobody wanted to be around. And one of the reasons why I do what I do and why you do what you do is because we don't want that for people. We don't want them to live in that victim mentality until they die, and they end up dying alone and miserable and bitter. There's so much to enjoy and explore and discover within ourselves and within our relationships and within our life. And, you have to make that conscious decision, though. It's kind of like the addict saying, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to make the change, and I'm ready to do what it takes to give up and to, go forward. It's the same kind of mentality. You have to have that mentality and that strength and that readiness.
Absolutely. Or that stubbornness in my case.
Or the stubbornness. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what are some of the things that you did that helped you move from survivor into thriver mode?
Setting goals was important to me. So I had to get clarity on what it is that I wanted to achieve moving forward. I had spent so much time just getting up and seeing how my day went that I actually wasn't moving forward for a very long time. So I started setting big goals, scary goals. I started really challenging the things that I said I would never do. So like leaving the country was important for me because it gave me an opportunity to have a clean slate, right? A lot of times we end up reliving our trauma because of the toxic environments that we find ourselves in. So I removed myself from the toxicity as best that I could. And I got grounded in really understanding me. So daily reflection. I did a lot of journaling. Matter of fact, I have a journal right now that looks like a Bible that I write in every single day because I know that having the self-awareness of where my emotions are taking me is the one thing that I need to stay grounded in. I liken self-awareness to like a lighthouse. It only comes around for 30 seconds at most, but it gives you the opportunity to chart your path forward. And so I really got grounded in my self-awareness and got honest with myself, challenged my actions every day so that the next day that I could do something different and better. So it's not something that you do once, tick the box and keep moving. It's something that I do literally on a daily basis, even now, because the conscious reprogramming that has to happen, the subconscious reprogramming that has to happen is very important. We operate from limiting beliefs that we sometimes are not even aware of.
Mm-hmm.
And that was important for me to start challenging it. Why am I doing this action? Why am I taking this action? Am I taking it because I really want to, or be taking it because I feel that I need to? Why am I acting this way? Why did I react to things in this way? And then dig a little deeper, because then it gives me an opportunity, although I may have identified my big triggers, there are small things that you don't even realize. So literally sitting back and reflecting on each and every day and challenging the actions that I know didn't necessarily serve me is what I do to keep myself moving forward.
Absolutely. And journaling, I'm a huge proponent of it. Almost everybody I speak to is a huge proponent of journaling. It really does help to get it out of your head and onto paper. And one of the exercises that I put people through is the why exercise. And that's, channel your inner 5-year-old where they're in that stage where it's why? Well, why? And do that to yourself. Why am I here? And then come up with the answer. Well, why this? And then come up with the answer. Why? And you just keep going until you get deeper, and then you finally get to that root cause. And then you're just like, oh, okay. That makes so much sense now. And then you can work on that root cause. So I think, that is such a great thing to do, is just to continue to ask yourself why.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Excuse me. I have like a frog in my throat this morning. Well, Leticia, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us today, telling us a little bit about your story and, just reminding us that there is so much more to life than being a survivor. Absolutely.
So I'm very grateful for the opportunity to share my story on your platform. So thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure. Listeners, as always, I will have all of Leticia's information in the show notes. Just go to releasingtraumapodcast.com, pull up her episode, and all of her contact information will be there for you. So again, Leticia, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you. Listeners, as always, thank you for tuning in. We'll talk to you in the next show. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure you hit subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss a show. Be sure to check us out on our new socials on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.